What if Salem's darkest secret wasn't the witch trials, but what they were hiding? Follow one researcher's terrifying discovery as he uncovers the truth buried beneath centuries of lies. The last witch of Salem was never caught, because it was never human. Based on the journal of Arthur Ainsworth, who vanished without a trace last October.
I arrived in Salem on an overcast morning, the sky bruised purple-gray, as if nature itself mourned what had happened here centuries ago. Even in daylight, an almost nocturnal hush fell on the narrow streets. Each shuttered window and weathered sign bore silent witness to the town's grim legacy. I had come as a curious pilgrim, drawn by folklore and scholarly intrigue rather than any folly of ghost hunting. As I passed the old witch house and its overtly painted museum sign, my heart thrummed with anticipation and dread in equal measure. Later that afternoon, I wandered among the granite slabs of the Salem Witch Trials Memorial. Row upon row recorded the names of those condemned: Bridget Bishop, John Proctor, Giles Corey. Each name seemed to glint with ghostly light in the waning sun. I read them softly, trying to steady my voice as the weight of history pressed on my chest. A gentle breeze brushed my cheek even as not a single leaf stirred. An old shopkeeper nearby crossed himself as I passed and murmured, "May they find peace at last." The warmth of his prayer faded quickly in my ears, and the unease in his voice sent a shiver down my spine. That night in the modest inn where I was lodging, I awoke to a strange tapping at my window. The cobblestone street below was empty and still, yet a light knock against the pane broke the silence. I sat up, heart pounding, and stared into the darkness at the closed shutters. The tapping ceased abruptly, replaced by a whispering that pricked my eardrums. Two low, urgent voices carried through the still air from just beyond the glass. I strained to make out words, an urgent plea, a name. The voices persisted, entangled with the sigh of the wind, until something cold and wet brushed against the glass. A scream rose in my throat, but I stifled it, pulling the covers tight around my body. When dawn finally came, I was drenched in sweat and trembling, and all was silent once more. The next morning I sought the Salem Historical Society archives, hoping to find clues within the musty recesses of old records. In the silent reading room, ancient tomes and brittle parchments lay waiting. Late that afternoon, a kindly librarian produced a yellowed manuscript from 1750, written by one Thomas Layton, an ancestor of a man wrongfully accused. I turned its fragile pages under the flicker of a lamplight, my rational mind hoping only to find history. But the words drew me in. Layton spoke of restless dreams and of knowing that those who died unjustly still haunted the very soil of this town. In shaky script, he wrote of hearing footsteps at midnight and seeing faces in mirrors. Beneath all his fear was a single, chilling line: "The last witch walks unseen among us." I forced myself to speak, to comment on the significance of what I read. The librarian nodded gravely, but her silence afterward unnerved me. When I resumed reading, it was under the haze of a gathering storm. Every so often I felt the chilling blow of a breeze across my neck, though the windows were closed. Once, a line of text blurred before my eyes, and as I blinked, it transformed into a scrap. A vellum enclosed between the pages. On that scrap was scrawled a name I had not known: Elizabeth Johnson, dated 1703. The candle beside me guttered as distant thunder rattled the windows. I flipped to the end of Layton's diary, and a final entry made me lose all composure. She promised me her return, that her vengeance would be shown to all. I snapped the book shut, hands trembling. Outside, lightning cleaved the sky, and the old clock chimed midnight in eerie echo. I hurriedly gathered my things and left the archive. The world outside was drenched by the storm. As I hurried down the narrow street, I felt as if eyes watched me from every shadow. I could not shake the rising dread that some unbroken thread had linked me to those ancient wrongs. For a brief moment I was certain I felt cold fingers close around my wrist. But when I glanced down in terror, I saw nothing at all. I wrapped my coat tighter and pressed on, determined to escape whatever darkness I had stirred. But Salem would not let me go so easily. In the manuscript's margins and between their lines, one name had kept surfacing: Mary Devlin. Local stories said she was a spinster living alone in the woods, claiming to inherit a witch's legacy. The name set my heart to a maddening rhythm. It was as though I had heard it whispered in the wind. The very next day, under a sky leaden with clouds, I took a horse-drawn wagon out of Salem, following an old forest road toward Danvers. The woods were strange and silent as I reached the house. It was a small cottage of gray stone and tangled ivy hidden among black pines. Light shone through a crooked window, but the front door hung slightly ajar. I knocked softly. A voice called, "Enter." Inside, a single oil lamp cast tall, flickering shadows against the walls. Seated at a rough or wooden table was the woman I sought. Her eyes, an unnatural shade of green, seemed almost to glow in the lamplight. She rose slowly, thin and bent with age. Yet there was something timeless about her, a presence out of place in this century. We exchanged civilities, though I found my voice hoarse with anticipation. "I know why you have come," she said quietly, her voice carrying an odd echo as though it resonated in my mind rather than the air. "You seek the Witch of Salem." I tried to appear composed, but her gaze pierced me like a lance. On the table lay an embroidery she had been working, a pattern of a twisted tree surrounded by strange symbols. Instead of panic, I felt a strange honor to witness it, but I demanded to know the truth about her bloodline. The woman merely smiled faintly and neither confirmed nor denied. "The past is not dead," she whispered, "and it is not even past." Suddenly, she turned from me and shivered, as if sensing something in the room that I had not noticed. I followed her look to the window and my skin crawled. A large crow stared in at me, its black eyes reflecting the lamp's flame. It tapped the glass lightly with its beak. The woman watched it with a bemused expression, then returned her cool gaze to me. "You will see her soon," she said, almost tenderly. I felt the room spin, heart pounding with a combination of fear and fascination. When I turned back to speak, the old woman had simply vanished into the shadows of the back room, as if swallowed by the darkness itself. She left behind only the faint smell of damp earth and a dozen unnerving questions. I fled that place with my ego bruised and my curiosity burning brighter than ever, the crow's warning cries echoing in my ears as I stumbled away through the blackened trees. I had hoped to escape what I was uncovering. Foolish, in retrospect. A stray remark from an innkeeper about secret gatherings in the woods filled my nights with restless dreams. One moonless night, unable to stay away, I found myself stumbling down a narrow path through the Danvers woods. The air was stale with autumn decay. After miles of navigating gnarled roots, I came upon a clearing ringed by twisted oaks. Under the unnaturally still canopy, a circle of shadowed figures stood in low chant around a single black candle set on the ground. My breath caught in my throat when I recognized Mary Devlin among them, head bowed. The chant was low and droning, too late for me to step back. I ducked behind a tree, heart hammering. The ritual grew more feverish. The figures swayed as one, and the candle's flame stretched upward with a sound like a scream. Above them, the sky split with lightning. In the brief flashes, the figures' faces glimmered, then vanished into darkness. Again, a heavy scent of burning pine and something foul assaulted my nose. I realized with terror that they were speaking in an arcane tongue, words older than Salem itself. Suddenly, Mary lifted her head as if she knew I was there. Her eyes shone fierce in the torchlight. She raised one hand and the others did likewise, their voices rising. With a crack like a whip, she drew an obsidian knife across her palm and sprinkled its blood into the salt circle. The chanting halted. Panicked, I turned to flee. In the confusion of my escape, I tripped over a root and fell to the earth. I cried out as a sharp pain lanced into my shoulder. Something knife-like had struck me in the chaos. Clutching my arm, I scrambled to my feet and ran blindly away, stumbling through the underbrush, branches slashing at me with cruel intent. By the time I emerged on the road, the moon had hidden behind clouds again and my shirt was soaked with Warm blood. The wound burned deeply, and something dark seemed to thread itself through my veins. I knew, with unshakable horror, that I had become part of whatever dreadful covenant I had just witnessed. I returned to Salem broken in body and spirit. The local doctor, a sensible man who had heard every kind of tale from fisherman and farmer, stitched the gash in my shoulder and offered little explanation beyond the usual cautions. He mentioned nothing of curses or covens. To him it was a simple wound to be treated and forgotten. But even as the wound closed, something far more sinister took root in me. Each night by candlelight I watched the skin around the laceration grow dark and bruise in intricate patterns, as if tiny tendrils squirmed beneath my flesh. Rational thoughts slipped away from me in those dark hours. Every mirror in my lodgings became a window to terror. In every reflection I saw Mary's face just behind me, silent and judging. At night, I heard chanting under my door and distant screams of those who died on the gallows. Birds would not perch on my windowsill. The woods outside seemed to whisper my name whenever the wind passed through the trees. I became a sleepwalker, drawn by unseen urges into the cold cellar, where I would find scratch marks on the floorboards and muddy footprints on the stairs. I could no longer trust even the daylight. Reality itself began to fray. Now I sit here, by a single guttering candle, writing these final words. My hand shakes as never before, and the ink bleeds slightly onto the ragged parchment. The flame trembles, casting a grotesque dance of light and shadow across the attic walls. I am lost. The Salem of history is consuming the Salem of the present, and I with it. Whatever scholar I once was is buried beneath this madness. If these words are ever found, let them serve as a warning. Curiosity can open doors that no man should ever approach. I know what waits for me in the darkness beyond this page. When the candle finally dies, so will I, and yet not. For even then, the legacy of Salem will endure. Even then, it was after the third sleepless night that I began seeing the gallows, not the quaint museum-replicated scaffold at Proctor's Ledge, but the old moss-covered gallows of 1692, rising crookedly on the hill behind the inn. At first I thought it a trick of light, a hallucination born of too many sleepless hours. But each dusk it returned, blackened wood stretching toward a sky the color of dead flesh, a thick rope hanging slack like a serpent from the noose. Crows clustered around it, silent and still, as though awaiting a ceremony. The townsfolk no longer met my eyes. When I walked through Essex Street, the air changed behind me. Chatter stopped, shutters closed. I asked the innkeeper about the gallows, and he stiffened, jaw clenched as he avoided the window. "There's nothing there, sir," he muttered. "Just trees." But his hands trembled when he handed me the key, and later that night I heard him muttering prayers in a tongue I could not place. One evening, my curiosity overpowered fear, and I climbed the hill. Each step through the underbrush felt longer than the last, as if time folded upon itself. I expected to find empty land or rotten ruins, but there it was, the gallows, just as I had seen it from afar, creaking in a breeze that didn't touch my skin. The sky had gone utterly silent. No insects, no birds, only my breath echoing in that cursed hollow. There were no footprints but mine. Yet when I reached the base of the structure, the noose swung forward, as if inviting me. And then I heard the voices. From within the hanging tree came a low chanting, barely human, repeating the names of the executed in hollow tones. The rope twitched. The beams groaned under unseen weight. Shadows danced against the twilight without any source of light. I turned to flee, only to find the trees had shifted. Paths no longer pointed back to the town. A woman's voice, a child's voice, called my name. "Do you see us now?" Dainty branches tore at my arms, the forest closing in. Yet I didn't stop until I stumbled, panting and wild-eyed, into the main street of Salem. The townspeople watched in silence, not with surprise, but with pity and fear. They knew. I had seen what should remain hidden. The dreams changed after that night. Gone were the half-formed whispers and vague shadows. Now I stood before a house, always the same one. White clapboards, broken shutters, a door red as blood. It stood at the end of a marsh path near Gallows Hill, a place no map recorded. Each night I ventured deeper in my dream, feeling compelled, until at last I stood before the door. It opened on its own, and inside was only a mirror. A tall, ancient mirror framed in charred oak, its glass misted like breath. At first it showed only me, tired, hollow-eyed, but slowly as I leaned closer, another face emerged beside mine. A woman. Her face long and pale, eyes bottomless and black. Her lips never moved, but I heard her in my mind. "You are the vessel." I awoke screaming. The sheets were wet, not with sweat but with river water and mud. My boots lay by the door, caked in marsh silt. That morning I walked until my feet ached, driven by an urge I could no longer ignore. I found the house just before sunset, hidden near the riverbank. It stood exactly as in my dreams. The door creaked open without my touch. There was no furniture, no dust, only the mirror. I approached. My reflection was wrong. It was me, and yet it wasn't. My eyes were black like hers, my mouth curled in a sneer I didn't feel. And in the reflection, my skin cracked like burnt paper, revealing something underneath. A black flame, an ancient hunger. Behind me in the mirror stood the woman again, arms outstretched like a puppeteer above a marionette. I tried to look away. I could not. My body did not move. But my reflection smiled. And then, I was outside. Back in Salem, but everything was slightly wrong. The colors too muted, the light too gray. People looked through me as if I weren't there. A horse-drawn cart passed by, carrying cabbages and a woman in colonial garb. I tried to speak. No one heard. I screamed. I wept. That is when I understood. I had not left the mirror. Some echo of me walks Salem now, a thing with my face and voice. I am trapped here behind the glass, watching the world through a warped pane. Mary Devlin walks past sometimes, and always she smiles, touches the mirror's surface and whispers, "One by one the watchers become the watched." It is 4:02 a.m. I am writing these last lines by candlelight, though I have no more candles left. The light comes from nowhere, and everywhere. I am no longer sure who I am. The mirror told me truths no man should carry. The town breathes through walls now. The whispers never stop. The last witch is not a person but a curse, passed down like a flame waiting for dry kindling. I was the kindling. To whoever finds this, do not follow the voices. Do not seek her house. Burn this page, burn this book, let the flame be the last thing you trust. E.H. Salem, 19th October.